There are moments that do not arrive as events. They do not interrupt what was happening before. They do not replace anything. They simply continue, not louder, not softer, just steady. Nothing here announces itself as important. Nothing asks to be noticed. And yet attention begins to settle. At first, there may still be a slight leaning forward, a habit of looking for what comes next, a quiet readiness to respond. But nothing calls for response. No direction forms. No task appears. No urgency gathers. The moment remains open. Thoughts continue to arise, but they no longer connect into sequences. They appear briefly, then dissolve before becoming stories. Without narrative, they lose weight. There is no need to follow them. No need to silence them either. They pass without consequence. Awareness softens its grip. It does not collapse. It does not drift away. It simply stops arranging. So much of experience is shaped by intention, by improvement, by subtle correction. Here, nothing is being improved. Nothing is being prepared. Nothing is being resolved. The absence of structure feels unfamiliar at first, not uncomfortable, just unused. The mind is accustomed to organizing, to evaluating, to deciding what matters most. In this space, nothing asks to matter more than anything else. Everything feels even, balanced without design. There is no center pulling attention inward, no edge pushing it outward. Experience unfolds without emphasis. Breathing continues in its own rhythm. No instruction makes it better. No adjustment is required. The body remains unguarded. There is no preparation for interruption, no expectation of change. Time moves, but it does not accumulate. Seconds are not counted. Moments are not compared. Nothing is building toward completion. There is no sense of being early, no sense of being late. The present stands on its own. Without comparison, judgment fades quietly. There is no better version of this moment, no improved state hiding ahead. The moment does not compete with another. It does not try to become meaningful. It remains ordinary. And the ordinary, when left untouched, reveals its steadiness. There is no realization forming here, no insight waiting to be uncovered. Nothing needs to be discovered. The simplicity continues without commentary. If a thought returns with more force, it still finds nothing to attach to, no plan to modify, no structure to enter. It passes through the same open space. Letting go does not feel like effort. It feels like nothing being held. The difference is subtle, but important. Effort implies resistance. There is no resistance here. Experience sustains itself without management. Awareness does not need to focus sharply. It spreads gently, allowing everything to exist without highlighting anything in particular. Nothing stands out as urgent. Nothing recedes into irrelevance. Everything shares the same quiet presence. Identity softens slightly, not disappearing, just less involved. There is no need to defend a position, no need to refine a role. The sense of self becomes a reference among many, not the center of everything. This lightness is not dramatic. It does not announce relief. It simply removes pressure. Without pressure, there is no correction. Without correction, there is ease. Even the idea of staying begins to dissolve. Staying implies a choice, a decision to remain instead of leave. Here, there is no leaving. There is only continuation. The moment does not point forward. It does not suggest growth or improvement. It does not ask to be extended. It is complete without completion. If attention drifts briefly, the steadiness remains. If attention sharpens again, it remains unchanged. This space is not fragile. It does not depend on perfect focus. It does not require silence. It holds whatever appears without adjustment. Gradually, without announcement, attention widens, not away from presence, but into everything at once. The quiet does not disappear. It becomes less distinct, less defined. It blends into ordinary awareness without resistance. There is no clear boundary between before and after, no signal that something has ended. The steadiness remains in the background, unclaimed, unforced. The ordinary quality of it all remains untouched, undemanding, simply present, and for now, nothing more is required. After a while, the steadiness no longer feels new. It does not stand out as a shift. It simply becomes the way the moment moves. There is nothing to compare it to, no earlier tension to measure against. The mind does not look back. It does not check for progress. It continues quietly. Attention rests without effort, not fixed on anything in particular, not drifting away either. It stays open. Within that openness, small movements still occur. A thought appears. A memory flickers. A faint sensation rises and fades. None of them ask for emphasis. None of them request continuation. They do not connect into a sequence. They do not build momentum. They pass through gently, unfinished and unconcerned. Most of the time, the mind reaches for continuation. It builds a line from one moment to the next. It creates direction. Here, direction does not form. Each moment stands on its own, not isolated, but not dependent. There is no storyline developing, no destination implied. The body reflects this absence of direction. Breathing continues in its own rhythm. Muscles remain unguarded. There is no anticipation in posture. Nothing prepares for what comes next. Nothing braces for interruption. Time feels less defined, not slowed, not accelerated. It simply loses urgency. Seconds are not counted. They do not accumulate into pressure. There is no sense of being early, no sense of being late. The moment does not measure itself. It does not evaluate its own duration. If a question appears, is this meaningful? Is this enough? It fades quickly. Meaning requires contrast. Value requires comparison. There is nothing here competing for value. The ordinary continues, untouched. Awareness does not attempt to deepen the experience. It does not search beneath the surface. There is no hidden layer to uncover. What is present is already sufficient. This sufficiency is quiet. It does not feel impressive. It does not feel empty. It simply does not feel lacking. Thoughts may briefly try to resume their usual rhythm, to construct a small narrative, to anticipate something ahead. But without reinforcement, they settle again. There is no resistance. Nothing is being pushed away. Nothing is being held. Nothing needs to be adjusted. Even subtle judgments, pleasant, dull, interesting, unimportant, lose their shape. Judgment depends on outcome. Outcome is not active, so judgment has nothing to attach to. Identity softens slightly in this space, not removed, not diminished, just less involved. There is no need to confirm who is experiencing this. No need to frame it as progress. Experience unfolds without ownership. The absence of urgency remains steady, not dramatic, not profound, just steady. Nothing tries to mark itself as important. Nothing asks to be remembered later. The moment continues without signature. Gradually, the unfamiliar quality fades. What once felt distinct now feels natural. The space blends into the ordinary. Thoughts return a little more frequently. Small plans, fragments of memory, brief commentary. They do not disrupt what remains. They settle into the same openness. There is no effort to maintain anything. Maintenance would imply fragility. This steadiness does not require protection. Even if attention narrows for a moment, even if thinking becomes slightly louder, nothing collapses. The quiet remains. Nothing needs to be carried forward. No insight to preserve. No state to recreate. The moment does not demand loyalty. The ordinary quality of everything stays intact, unmarked, unimproved, simply present. Awareness moves gently with whatever appears. It does not cling. It does not resist. It allows experience to pass in its own way. There is no desire to prolong this, no desire to shorten it. Duration holds no preference. The moment stands complete without conclusion. Eventually, without announcement, there is a faint widening, not an ending, not a shift away, just an expansion. Attention resumes its usual range, not leaving presence, but including more of it. Everything continues as it always has. Sounds, thoughts, small movements of awareness. But something remains softer, less compelled, less urgent. The openness does not disappear. It becomes background, unnoticed, unclaimed. There is no need to summarize what occurred. Nothing requires acknowledgement. Life resumes without interruption. There is no sense that something meaningful has occurred. No internal marker has been placed. No quiet announcement declares this moment complete. It simply passes without claiming significance. What remains does not ask to be remembered. It does not frame itself as clarity. It does not become reference. Experience continues without contrast, without emphasis, without needing to stand apart from anything else. The steadiness blends into everything else, not as something special, not as something rare, just as part of the ordinary flow. And for now, that is enough. At some point, even the sense of steadiness becomes unremarkable. It no longer feels like something that happened. It feels like something that has always been here. There is less awareness of quiet, less awareness of absence. The contrast fades. Attention no longer notices that it is resting. It simply rests. Thought continues to appear, but without insistence. A memory may surface. A small plan may begin to form. A phrase may move across the mind. None of it takes hold. Without urgency, thought has no structure to grow into. It does not gather force. It does not demand completion. It remains light. Experience does not feel shaped. There is no effort to guide it, no effort to hold it still. It unfolds on its own. The body reflects this simplicity. Breathing remains steady, not deepened, not controlled. Posture does not prepare for anything. There is no subtle readiness beneath the surface. Time moves, but it does not press forward. There is no anticipation building quietly, no expectation of what should happen next. Moments do not accumulate. They do not build toward meaning. They pass evenly. Identity softens again, not erased, not dissolved, just less referenced. There is no need to locate yourself inside the moment, no need to confirm that you are present. Presence is not something being maintained. It is simply occurring. Even subtle evaluation becomes faint. This is calm. This is neutral. This is ordinary. Those labels do not settle. They feel unnecessary. Nothing needs to be described. Description would introduce form. Form would introduce edges. Edges would introduce contrast. Contrast would introduce preference. Preference would introduce direction. Direction is absent. Without direction, nothing pulls attention forward. Without destination, there is no movement toward completion. Completion is not relevant here. The moment does not seek resolution. It does not attempt to become more than it is. It remains sufficient, not impressive, not minimal, just sufficient. Thought may return with slightly more clarity, a task to remember, a place to go, something unfinished from earlier. It does not disrupt what remains. It appears, is acknowledged lightly, and fades without argument. There is no need to push it away, no need to follow it. It does not require reaction. Experience continues evenly. Nothing stands out as central. Nothing is pushed to the edges. Everything shares the same space. The mind accustomed to organizing finds little to arrange, and without arrangement, it rests. This rest does not feel like achievement. It does not feel like accomplishment. It feels natural. The absence of urgency becomes ordinary, not noticeable, not emphasized, just present. There is no impulse to extend this, no subtle wish to remain here longer. Remaining would imply departure. There is no departure. If change were to occur, it would be included. If sound were to enter, it would belong. Nothing is being protected. Protection would suggest fragility. This does not feel fragile. It feels steady without rigidity. Even the idea of steadiness begins to lose its meaning. There is less interest in naming what is happening, less interest in defining it. Naming would create distance. Distance would create observer and observed. There is no need for separation. Experience is not divided. It simply unfolds. Thought passes through it. Sensation passes through it. Awareness does not stand apart. There is no center demanding attention, no boundary requiring defense. Everything remains open. The ordinary continues without interruption. No moment claims importance. No moment insists on being remembered. Nothing marks itself as significant. And because nothing marks itself, everything feels equal. Time moves quietly in the background, not pushing, not pulling, just continuing. The mind does not anticipate the end of this. It does not wait for transition. There is no signal that something must shift. Everything remains where it is. Even subtle tension, if it briefly appears, does not take root. It passes like the others, unweighted, unclaimed. There is no need to gather anything from this. No lesson forming, no insight building, nothing to carry forward. Experience continues without being stored, without being shaped into memory, without being framed. The quiet does not stand out anymore. It blends with everything else. It becomes background, just there. There is no sense that something should follow, no internal cue that this is leading somewhere. The moment does not hint at continuation. It does not suggest interruption. It simply remains available. If attention shifts slightly, nothing is disturbed. If thought becomes clearer for a second, nothing changes. Experience continues without needing to be shaped, without needing to be understood, without needing to become anything else. Eventually, even the sense of openness feels ordinary. It no longer contrasts with anything. It does not feel like space. It does not feel like quiet. It simply feels like what is. Attention is no longer aware of resting. It does not recognize itself as settled. There is no commentary about steadiness, no subtle confirmation that something is being maintained. Nothing is being maintained. Experience unfolds without supervision. Thought continues to move lightly. A brief memory may appear. A small intention may form. A sentence may begin and end inside the mind. None of it interrupts. None of it defines the moment. Without reinforcement, thought remains soft. It does not gather into structure. It does not claim direction. There is no momentum building. The body remains at ease. Breathing moves without instruction. No effort deepens it. No effort controls it. It continues on its own rhythm. Time passes in the background, not measured, not managed. There is no sense of duration, no awareness of how long this has been happening. The moment does not compare itself to another. It does not ask whether it is enough. Without comparison, there is no tension. Without tension, nothing needs adjustment. Identity becomes even lighter, not distant, not blurred, just less central. There is no need to locate yourself inside this. No need to confirm that you are present. Presence does not require confirmation. It continues regardless. Judgment remains quiet. There is nothing to improve, nothing to refine, nothing to correct. Correction would imply a better version. A better version would imply direction. Direction would imply movement toward something else. There is nothing else to move toward. The mind, accustomed to shaping experience, slows its shaping. It does not attempt to turn this into insight. It does not label it as calm. It does not frame it as meaningful. Meaning would introduce structure. Structure would introduce emphasis. Emphasis would create hierarchy. There is no hierarchy here. Everything shares the same weight, or the same lack of weight. Nothing stands out. Nothing recedes. Experience feels evenly distributed. Even subtle sensations do not claim importance. They arise and dissolve within the same field. There is no urge to extend this, no desire to preserve it. Preservation would suggest loss. Loss is not present. If change were to happen, it would be included. If interruption were to occur, it would belong. Nothing needs to be protected. The absence of protection feels steady, not rigid, not fragile, simply steady. Even the idea of steadiness becomes unnecessary. There is less interest in describing what is happening, less interest in understanding it. Understanding would create distance. Distance would divide experience. There is no division forming. Awareness does not stand apart from what it observes. It does not create separation. Everything unfolds within the same openness. There is no center demanding attention, no edge requiring defense. Time continues without urgency. Moments do not build toward conclusion. They do not hint at ending. They pass evenly. The ordinary remains unmarked. Nothing claims significance. Nothing insists on being remembered. There is no need to gather anything from this, no insight forming quietly in the background, no lesson assembling itself. Experience does not ask to be carried forward. It does not ask to be stored. It remains simple. And because it remains simple, it does not strain. There is no internal movement toward improvement, no subtle dissatisfaction, no effort to deepen or extend. What is present does not need to become more. Thought may briefly intensify. It may become clearer, more defined. It still dissolves without consequence. There is no structure for it to enter, no narrative waiting to continue. The quiet does not stand apart anymore. It blends completely with ordinary awareness. It no longer feels like a state. It feels like continuity. Attention does not try to hold it. It does not try to name it. It does not try to remain here. Remaining would suggest leaving. Leaving would suggest distance. There is no distance. Everything is already included. Experience continues without demand, without direction, without emphasis. Nothing announces itself as complete. Nothing signals that something else should begin. It simply remains available, unmarked, unforced, open without trying to be open, and nothing within it needs to change. At some point, even the sense of continuity becomes subtle. It is no longer noticeable as something ongoing. There is no awareness of still happening, no awareness of remaining. Experience does not comment on itself. It does not confirm steadiness. It does not register quiet. It simply unfolds. Thought moves gently. A shape forms. A word appears. A faint internal sentence begins and ends. None of it demands continuation. Without direction, thought cannot extend very far. It softens before becoming structure. There is no effort to shorten it, no effort to allow it. It fades naturally. The body remains unchanged. Breathing continues without intention. No rhythm is adjusted. No posture is corrected. Nothing prepares for interruption. Time moves in the background. It does not press forward. It does not gather behind. There is no accumulation. Moments do not stack into meaning. They do not build toward insight. They simply pass. Identity feels lighter again. Not removed, not diffused, just less referenced. There is no need to locate yourself in the experience. No need to confirm who is observing. Observation happens without ownership. Awareness does not stand apart. It does not frame itself as witness. Everything exists within the same field. Judgment remains quiet. Nothing asks to be better. Nothing asks to be different. Even subtle preferences do not take hold. Preference requires comparison. Comparison requires contrast. Contrast requires direction. Direction is absent. Without direction, nothing competes. Without competition, nothing strains. The ordinary quality of the moment continues, unmarked, unimproved, undemanding. There is no urge to extend this quiet, no fear of losing it. Fear would imply fragility. Nothing feels fragile. If sound were to arise, it would belong. If thought were to intensify briefly, it would belong. Nothing stands outside the openness. The mind does not attempt to summarize. There is no conclusion forming. No internal signal that something meaningful has occurred. Meaning would require structure. Structure would require emphasis. Emphasis would create hierarchy. There is no hierarchy here. Everything remains evenly present. Even subtle sensations do not rise above the whole. They appear and dissolve within the same space. There is no desire to preserve what is happening. Preservation would suggest loss. Loss would suggest attachment. Attachment is not forming. Experience does not need to be held. It does not need to be remembered. It does not need to be repeated. It continues without request. Time passes without announcement. There is no awareness of duration, no subtle counting beneath the surface. The moment does not move toward an ending. It does not prepare for transition. It does not shift toward conclusion. It remains open without trying to be open. Thought may briefly sharpen, a clearer idea, a small recognition. It does not settle into importance. It fades without resistance. There is no effort to return to quiet. Quiet is not something maintained. It is simply present when nothing interferes, and nothing is interfering. Even the idea of this state loses meaning. State implies beginning and end. There is no clear beginning, no clear boundary, no clear separation from what came before. Experience blends seamlessly with itself. The openness that once felt noticeable now feels ordinary, not because it diminished, but because it stopped standing out. There is less interest in naming what remains, less interest in understanding it. Understanding would introduce distance. Distance would introduce perspective. Perspective would create interpretation. Interpretation would create narrative. Narrative would create direction. Direction is not needed. Nothing is moving towards something else. Nothing is moving away. Everything continues evenly, without demand, without urgency, without emphasis. The body breathes. Thought appears. Time moves. None of it asks to be shaped. None of it asks to be improved. Nothing is waiting to happen. Nothing is waiting to end. Experience remains available, unclaimed, unforced, unmeasured, and it continues without requiring anything further.